What is up, War of the Visions fans? Back at you with another character review on the start of a new year. I'm a little late to Luartha here, but I wanted to dive into her before we forgot about her and things moved on because we are technically about to enter a sort of gunner meta, if you will, with some changes to the maps and new releases of Nivlu this week, where there's going to be some different options of what you can do. So Luartha, I can honestly, in hindsight, see why Gumi decided to delay her release. She honestly is average. She genuinely is. There's some good things about her. There's some bad things about her. She's relatively straightforward in terms of kit. Supremely a glass cannon with not as much potential overall output as the other gunners because they have differences primarily with how they function with the ranger and sniper subjobs, where she's limited to the gunner, which is simply just straight shoot. There's no arc trajectory, and you don't get any benefit of height. So, long story short, let's jump into it. I'm going to try to make this one a little bit quicker because I wanna keep your attention, guys. So, there's a lot to talk about here, and I want to make sure you all hear it. Character overview, she's fire, one of the few fire units that is recently released. Jobs, dual gunner, gunner, soldier. So to me, the gunner and the dual gunner is really what makes her kind of one-trick pony. The soldier sub-job you're really not going to use. To me, that job is there to really round out her stats to make her have more personality, separate from the other gunners. In terms of the weapons, it's a gun, and then equips. The tough thing about gunners, they're super limited for equipment, and honestly, they're super limited for espers. We'll get to that after. But the equips in particular, relatively poor overall. They're stuck to hat, cloth, and accessories. Back 2 months ago, 3 months ago, this was fine when evade was still a thing, where gunners could easily add some evasion to make up for how glass cannony they were. But now that evasion is no longer so much of a thing, really difficult to try to equip hats, cloths, and accessories to try to give us some bulk and survivability. Relatively straightforward move and jump. In terms of resistances, 20% to ice, weak 10% to water. That's pretty straightforward. And then resistances to damage types, pretty good actually. 20% to slash, which is a super meta damage type other than pierce, and then magic 5% is rather irrelevant. So overall, it's sitting pretty well. In terms of stats, luck and agility here, she's not an evade unit, but she does get some decent speed. So her luck stat overall extremely poor. You can see the average of this entire list, URs only, is 199. She's at 189. She suffers in that department. Total agility, this is her base with the board, not using any passives. 59 overall, it's okay. It's average. She does have some abilities to pump it up, though, which we'll get to soon. And then, so total evasion-wise, where she sits, if you were to combine the whole package, it's really not there. Yeah, we'll move on. The luck stat is abysmally bad, so we're going to try to find ways to hedge against that. And then finally, this is a agility chart here. So long story short, that first orange column is their total innate agility without any passives. So you can see Luartha here sitting at 59 is... if you actually look at the list, this list is not sorted. It's the second one. So 59 in the broad scheme of things is decently competitive, but once you start adding passives, if you were to not give her an agility passive and keep her at 59, you can see how quickly 59 sits down here toward the bottom. So she genuinely needs her support ability that's going to boost her agility to keep her competitive at the top of this list. So we'll get into that in another minute as well when we look at the classes. In terms of accuracy and crit, so as it pertains to dexterity, again, luck is super bad, but the dexterity, out of this world good. The average on this list is 192. You can see Luartha sitting at 263. That's pretty competitive with what the other three gunners have as well. And that's really the look at I want to take when I'm looking at Luartha, how she compares with the other three gunners, because overall, they do a lot of really similar things with a lot of similar job overlap in terms of how they attack, what their modifiers are, what kind of status effects they have, etc., etc. So dexterity is actually out of this world, which is pretty great for her attack as well, because gunners utilize dexterity in the attack formula. 25% of your dexterity gets added to your attacks. So the higher that stat, she's going to like that as well. Total accuracy with the board is at 128. Long story short, total accuracy with all her passives, 130, which isn't bad. That dexterity stat really makes up for the poor luck, where, at the end of the day, she obviously wants more accuracy as well, just because, you can be the hardest hitting damage dealer in the world, but if you can't hit your target and you're getting 0, means nothing. So accuracy is super important. The attack stat, though, this is where she really differentiates herself from the other gunners. So unit board and job, as you can see here, I've compared it to the other three. She's the highest by a fair margin out of the gate. So that's number one. The second thing, though, they do have some master abilities and some board slots that increase attack as well. Not all of them do. You can see Frederica doesn't. Also, fun thing, I think the designers messed up on Frederica's name because we got Luartha, Lucia, Niv, Lu. So I should probably call her Fredluca from now on because there seems to be a trend there. If you have a gun, you need a Lu in your name. Anyways, back to the topic. You can see with just the master ability and the board up, she significantly starts to outpace the other gunners in terms of overall attack. And the giant kicker is that she does have a self-sacrifice passive that boosts the attack. None of the other gunners have any passives that boost their attack. So at the end of the day, if you do go for, really emphasize the attack side of her, because there's not many ways to bulk her, so you might as well kind of go full offense. She's significantly higher in the attack department than the other gunners. There are some trade-offs, though. We'll get to that soon. And finally, this is the HP outlook. Bottom line, I really just want to quick gloss this bottom line here. 1751 is what she sits at for HP. It is a fair amount lower than the other gunners. Very, very weak. And in terms of equipment and what's available for like Espers and stuff, she ends up being really, really low in the HP department. So that is kind of a huge demerit in the broad scheme of what map you're playing on. Other important stats, defense penetration, super important for gunners, where their modifiers on their attacks aren't as high as you'd like to see. So the defense penetration is super, super important for them actually dealing a fair amount of damage. Tune-up, which is a passive ability, you're going to want that equipped guaranteed. It gives them an 40% defense penetration, but she does have a buff where firing stance gives her an extra 20. So she's sitting rather pretty at 60. That's kind of competitive with the others. Definitely need to have that in her kit to really take advantage of the attack stat that you have and the damage output. And then finally, missile attack up. So long story short, the way the characters work in terms of damage formula, if your attacks are lower modifiers, like 121%, 150%, you're going to want more in the way of modifier buffs. So missile attack up, element up, killer up, both type and element killer. If you have higher modifiers, though, like you're looking at a soldier class where hazard slash does a fuck ton of damage, then you want to really boost the attack stat. So overall, in the broad scheme of things, missile attack up, she's relatively competitive with the other ones, so it's really your prerogative whether you want to emphasize the attack stat, given that that's kind of her strength, but she does have some lower modifier attacks, so you also might want to look at, boosting killers and other modifiers in terms of missile attack up and things of that nature. Class of job overview. So passive abilities here, to me, there's like hands down, you kind of need like at least one. Tune-up is a must. Not only is that necessary for actually doing damage in terms of eating through defense, but genuinely needs the agility to stay competitive in terms of the turns. The second thing here, these missile masteries are okay, but to me, self-sacrifice is really the big kicker here for what boosts her up to higher echelons of damage output, particularly if you're trying to burst down certain ice units, where if you look at what is meta for ice, you're talking Agrius, potentially Gilgamesh, like tankier units that have some defense and HP that you need to burn through quickly. I don't think she'd really suffer per se, going against other ice units per se, in terms of like, Rosa might outrange her a little bit. There's Medina's not really a concern, et cetera, et cetera. So that being said, I like self-sacrifice. Obviously there's a penalty with the decreased resistances, but the goal is to hopefully kill things fast enough that doesn't matter. To me, she does not win in a battle of sustain. Even if you don't have self-sacrifice on, her HP is so low that she does just get beaten down really, really quickly, particularly because she does get a little closer to the team fight than what I'd like to see. In terms of counter abilities, I'm a big fan of predictive shot just because you have the potential to kill your enemy before they actually get their attack off, and there's a higher chance to proc here than counter shot. It does have a little decreased range, but overall I think predictive fire, pretty decent way to go. And then getting into the main job here, dual gunner. This is the class that requires her to be a little closer to the team fight, so I'm not a big fan of this class overall. And her sub job, the gunner, has more status effects on that class. So although the attacks here are relatively cheaper, overall in terms of damage output, they're a little bit lacking. And in particular, I want you to look at the range here. The range on the dual gunner class is smaller than the gunner class. So this one I'm not a huge fan of. Firing stance, though, is a must-to-have on. And obviously, I like quad shot and dual trigger because in the broad scheme of how missile comps really optimize is that even though they don't do a ton of damage, the hope is you can get some good chains off where you get a quad shot, another missile attack, etc., and you can really ramp up damage quickly depending on how that unfolds. In terms of doing the dual gunner as a sub job, not a big fan, unfortunately. This is where she really unlocks some of her extra AoE potential, but I just don't think there's enough here to really round her out or make her shine. To me, you're going to see why in a second. The gunner sub job, so ton of attacks here. You'll notice in terms of range on these abilities, she has an extra range on it, or an extra range on it. That obviously is better for her survivability. And then even though the modifiers are relatively the same, 121%, 121%, they are a smidge more expensive. So if you're comparing something like, we'll look at Blackout here. So Rapid Fire is 12 AP, Blackout is 17 AP, but you get the chance to blind. Same thing with Leg Shot, like 121% modifier is relatively low, but you have the chance to inflict Immobilize. So 14 AP compared to the 12 AP of the other. To me, this is where she really starts to get some extra utility. You have 3 status effects on this job: Disable, Immobilize, and Blind. And that's really where she's going to come in handy in the broad scheme of things. So the big downside to Gunner and Dual Gunner is that they're limited by elevation. So in the current arena map, and I even think the next arena map potentially with the Gunners, that's where she loses per se to some of the other missile users, where you're looking at Lucia, Frederica, Nivelu, even Rosa, because they are, they take advantage of Ranger subjobs, Sniper subjobs. Essentially their attacks don't have to go straight A to B. They get a little more arc trajectory in there. So you're able to hit things not only at a longer range, but you're also not constrained by things in your way on the map. So there is a downside there that the Ranger and Sniper subjobs are more forgiving for height, where they can hit more differences in elevation. Gunner does not. Soldier, to me, this is literally, again, just for building up her stats. I wouldn't ever use this class on her. It's just she's not bulked enough to be near the front line to actually use any of these attacks, in my opinion. In terms of other stats and info, her limit burst is decent, but again, the range, she has to be closer to the team fight, so I'm fair on it. That being said, decreased agility is a nice, utility to it, relatively cheap, and it is a double hit. So I like the limit burst, but I think it's average because I don't really think it fits into the kit of where she ideally wants to be on the battlefield. And then her TMR, I actually like. So her TMR is a gun, rare weapon TMR. I do think WOTV Calc does have a misprint here. I believe the way it's written in game is that she has a chance to stun the enemy, but it's only on basic attack. So that's essentially the effect. But overall, it is a little bit middling in terms of the attack department, but it boosts the accuracy and crit rate, which she needs, because she has low luck, so she doesn't have very high crit. And the accuracy, she does great, but she's actually less accurate than the other gunners in broad scheme of things, so this helps round her out. And honestly, the other gun options, not great, so this is a really valuable option for her. In terms of the master ability, increase attack and then increase ice killer. So again, this is really focusing on her being an ice killing unit, with obviously the advantage of the element matchup, fire versus ice, but also having the innate killer as well. So really important to how you want to use her. Vision card synergy. So there's 5 overall. I really like new test subjects on her. Obviously, it's meant for Lucia, but this dexterity stat makes her of 70, makes it not only that she shoots everything out of the sky, but if you recall, dexterity stat is part of the attack formula for the gunner jobs, so boosting that dexterity does chip in a lot of extra attack. I've built mine currently, and using it with an Ifrit card somewhere in the comp, or even like something with 35% attack increase, my Lucia is hitting almost 1,300 attack in terms of before modifiers. Crazy. So yeah, anyways, increase acquired AP. This is huge because she wants as much AP as possible. Missile attack is great, and then attack resist I love, just because there's a lot of single unit attacks in the gunner meta where that kind of hedges their defense a little bit when you're going in some of these duels. Secondly, Frederica's Dream, less optimal just because the unit effect isn't as synergistic, where acquired AP is way more valuable, but Frederica's Dream is an older card, so more of you may have it. Overall, the stats still pretty decent. It's comparable, but party effect actually is technically stronger, where missile attack of 35 compared to 25 on the test subjects card. So there is some definite value here. It's just maybe not as synergistic as you'd like. Third here, I do like Ifrit. It does take a little penalty on attack, but because she's a fire unit, she gets the benefit of the increase of fire attack and the team buff of attack of 50%. So if you are running a comp where you want to boost some of that attack stat, this is a definite option. Fourth here, Odin, I think is good on any DPS, so I just have it here as a de facto. Human killer of 10% is valuable, and the increase of attack resist is valuable here, where, again, a lot of those 1v1 duels, this is a super valuable way to hedge against certain attacks without actually building resistances toward them. So I like this card a lot. And then finally, Mask of Deceit, not meant for her, but it could be used on her depending on what other gunner you might have or what other comp you might have. To me, this is really when in the new meta where you need that missile resist of 20%. So the reason why I do like this, it does have a ton of HP. You sacrifice a little attack, but the extra dexterity and luck on this card, again, helps her attack, helps her accuracy, helps her crit potential. So this card does have some potential value. And the human killer 10%. If I like it that on the Odin card, I like it on the Mask of Deceit card for the same reason. So obviously she doesn't get the same full utility as the Glaciella and Victoria might, but great card overall still, depending on the comp you're going against. Esper Synergies. None! I'm kidding. There actually are some Esper Synergies, but they're woefully bad for gunners. Overall, Tetrasulfate's kind of the default just because it does have missile attack up in its kit. That being said, you're going to take a penalty here, losing your ice benefit in terms of resistances. So if you are building her to kind of kill ice units, you're giving up some of that potential resistance in order for some extra offense, which she may not need. It does have some good agility, though, and honestly, the attack stat overall is decent. The second one, this is de facto again for DPS. Got a lot of HP, a lot of attack. The agility in particular, immensely helpful. There is technically missile resist on Odin, so that helps if there is a gunner meta and you're going against others. And then 25% human killer, huge for overall damage output. The third, this is an MR Esper, and it's similar to Tetra where you're taking an ice penalty, but overall in the broad scheme of the stats, you do take kind of an HP penalty here, but it's still competitive for agility, technically has more attack, still has missile attack up of 10 compared to the 15 on Tetra, and then it does have a 15% increase to attack overall, and theoretically you could do some ice resist as well and slash resist depending on what you're fighting against. So overall, to me, gunners, there's not a lot of Espers that are tailor-made to gunners. They obviously have a couple that help them, but to me, you're going to want to use Espers to really cater to the AI in terms of what your agility is to get your turn order where you want to be, but also secondly, just for matchups and resistances, where if you are trying to, go after a certain kind of element, go for an Esper that's got some element killer in it. Go for an Esper that, has some specific resistances that you're looking for, that obviously you trade off some of the, other jobs where they normally get some offensive benefit. You're really trading that off for other parts to round the character off. Equipment optimization. Again, woefully bad for gunners currently, given the state of the game. There's two guns in particular. The first is Ras Al Ghazi. This is the de facto gun of the game. It's a good gun. Overall, though, the penalty of 3 on the agility is one that you want to essentially balance, where you have to offset that agility either in your Esper, so you go like Odin and Ras Al Ghazi, or it depends on the TMR you put on, or if you're going something like Zizabels, you're going to have a lot of agility on that, or Lucia's boots, which I have later in this presentation, to really offset the loss in agility. Overall, though, offensive output, I like it because you theoretically could build it for crit for her, but also if you build it for assault, it's 207, far outpaces any other gun that's currently in the game. So great overall option. The second one is the TMR. The only problem with this is TMRs are a decently valuable slot, so if you're giving that up for a weapon, you might be, negating a couple options that you would otherwise like to have. I do like it though because you can see the 150 attack is relatively competitive overall with Ras Al Ghazi with the the other two builds, but it does have a ton of accuracy, does have a little extra crit, and let's be real, unless she's building up a ton of AP forever, the stun could help, but probably by the time in the fight when she's using basic attacks because she's out of AP, she's honestly probably already going to be dead. She just doesn't last that long in the fight overall. So these two options, definite viable options. Non-TMR equipment, awful, terrible. I mean it. There's really not a lot of good suggestions because she's cloth, hat, and accessory. Cloth and hat, overall, the hats are, again, they're built more for evasion and for rounding out some stats that she doesn't actually need per se. And then in terms of the cloths, so I like Platinum Robe because there's a lot of HP on it. It's got missile resist, which is super synergistic to some of those duels. And to me, if you're building it for shield, this is by far the highest defense you can get on a piece of armor. The other ones, in terms of Smart Coat and the new one from the Shiva event, they block, they have some slash resist, they have magic resist. So, I don't know if you're using a gunner into those comps all the time, so you don't really get the full utility. And then honestly, they don't have a lot of bulk either, where the HP stat is okay, but nothing is as high as the 18 defense stat here on either of those builds. So the only other one that I might consider is the Wolf Mask, only because in terms of defense stacking and obviously extra accuracy and dexterity here, you can have 14 defense, which is on the higher echelon of what you can equip. But again, you're giving up a lot of HP bulk to equip this because it's either the hat or the armor, or the hat or the cloth. You can't do both. So, if you're looking at the HP difference here between Platinum Robe, you're looking at, let's say, the shield build, 478 HP versus 151, and you're looking at 18 defense versus 14 defense. So, Platinum Robe is far superior. Wolf Mask is a viable option only because, to me, it's cheaper, so probably a little bit easier to build. And the third one is the Alexandrite Ring, again, for some of the kind of the same reasons. It does have elemental resist, which might, help her survive a smidge longer, but honestly, she's that fragile, it doesn't have a huge effect. Increases to accuracy, which she doesn't need, but obviously still helps her stay competitive with other gunners. And then finally, it's just, you can have some crit potential here. So this accessory, it's okay, but it's super, super limited. I really mean it. It's hard to build these units because the Sage Hat is really meant for dodge. And the other cloths are just, even TMR, cloths, they're not meant for like gunners. The cloths are really like mage heavy, so there's a lot of SPR built into it. Some of them, like Miranda, emphasize slash. Some of them, they just don't work on gunners, so it's really limited. But accessory wise, this is why I'm iffy on using her gun as her TMR. I really like these. So Bewitching Boots, I love. 7 agility is huge. Increase of range is huge. An increase of agility on the ability is also huge. So I'm a big fan of this. Also does add a little bit of defense. So A, yes. B, Bewitching Hills. Same kind of concept. I usually put these two together because they do a lot of the same things. They give you some defense. They're good agility booster, extra accuracy, decrease of chance of being targeted. It's super important. Obviously, she might still get caught up in some AoEs, but the hope is that she can, be a square or two off where that doesn't happen. The third one, and this one is literally just for stats, not even the ability. Angel Ribbon. Again, because she's so fragile and doesn't have a lot of bulk, I like the HP of this accessory on her. I like the defense of 8 on her, and it's got some crit as well, which she needs crit because she's got a really shitty luck stat. So overall, to me, this TMR is just for like stat padding to round out some of her weaknesses. Restore AP is okay, but to me, in the turn 1, turn 2, she's going to want to use some of her own buffs instead. So I'd probably turn the TMR ability off if I was equipping this, to be honest. And obligatory, finally, the bells, again, ton of agility, the accuracy to really like make sure she hits everything in sight. She's going to hit it anyway, depending on what dexterity you add to her, because her dexterity is already super high. But this skill, also super valuable, where she can just constantly keep firing away. The moment she starts using her basic attack is the moment that she really loses in the broad scheme of things. So that's Luartha in a nutshell. I think it's an okay character. Like I said, huge cons are that she's limited to what height she's attacking against, because the two things that I found is that A, she either has to not attack because she can't hit them at the trajectory they're at, or B, she'll put herself in a weird position to get the attack off and essentially expose her. Just a second here. The other thing that I think is a con is just that she is relatively straightforward, that the gunner and the dual gunner jobs overlap a lot, but she has a use. I just don't know if it's a huge use. So like I said, Frederica, Lucia, and Nivlu have the advantages of some of their sub jobs having better trajectories where you can hit things more often, but Luartha definitely is a fun unit to play with because of the exceptionally high attack, where I have gotten some pretty decent knocks on enemy Agriases. In the broad, we're looking at current comps as well. She doesn't do well against sustained comps, in my opinion, because if you're running against something that has a unit that's got courage or zombie re-raise, regen, physical shield, she just, unless you're really building a ton of AP to constantly just barrage the enemy and just slaughter them, as much as possible, she's just going to die sometime before she can kill things, just because she's so glass cannony. I do want to do more testing, but we are a little bit limited to what maps we have available at the moment. So as we get new maps for both Arena and Guild Wars, I'd be curious to see how she works. But overall, I'm glad they at least put another fire unit in here. I've tried some pairings with her and Christmas Mockery just to get the extra HP on her, the 10% boost. But the downside to Mockery is that she has a 20% weakness to missile resist. So if we're running into a gunner meta, Mockery is going to suffer greatly, even if she's giving Luartha a little extra bulk. So some interesting things to play with. I'm curious where she ends up. Like I said, I can see why Gumi delayed her, but overall, I don't think she's a terrible character. I just think she's really situational and really strategic to what comp you're running against. So hope you enjoyed the review. Thanks for listening. And as always, feel free to give critiques, criticisms, questions. I do hope to do a Nivlu review next. It'll kind of be similar because, they do have a lot of things in common in terms of attack type and what the game is about to go into. But if you see any other characters you want reviewed, feel free to mention them in the comments, and I'll try to get them done as soon as possible. So thanks, everybody, and good luck pulling this week.